You're listening to Inside the War Room, Case Studies in Crisis. Join us as we explore true stories and reveal new insights with our guests, key figures in some of the largest and most complex events of our time. In this episode,
because if you're in front of a lectern and your clothes are all rumbled and you look like a hot mess, guess what? They're going to get that message. If your uniform looks sharp and your boots are wiped clean, they're going to get that message. And if you're going to be on the radio or the net and you're going to give directions and order to people that are in harm's way, you better be the calmest, coolest, and clearest you've ever been in your entire life. And you better write your script before you ever key that mic. And that's what I did. I come up with the 5 things I thought we needed to do. I wrote the script in my head, and I keyed that mic.
And now, it's time to go inside the war room with your hosts, Shireen Abadi, Michael Estevez, and Jordan Strauss.
Welcome to Inside the War Room. I'm Shireen Abadi. I'm sure you've heard the saying in sports, practice like you want to play. The point being that your training should simulate what a real game looks and feels like. I would argue that that motto extends beyond sports to all aspects of life. As many of you know, I used to be an FBI agent, and while I was with the FBI, I found that the best agents hone their skills, whether investigative or tactical, so that when the time came, they'd accustom their bodies and minds to perform at the highest levels. In this episode, Michael talks with Danny Linskey, Superintendent-in-Chief of the Boston Police Department during the April 15, 2013 Boston Marathon bombing. You'll hear how Danny trained his department for the game day he hoped would never come, and how that foresight helped him and his team navigate one of the worst terrorist attacks on U.S. soil.
To begin, can you just tell us a little bit about your personal background and your career path?
Grew up in Boston my entire life. I always wanted to be a Boston cop. And I figured I needed to go in the Marine Corps to become a police officer. So I decided to join the Marine Corps my senior year of high school. My hope was that that would happen and I would fly, go to officer candidate school, go to flight school, and fly F-18s for the Marine Corps. So that was my dream. And I'd taken the police exam for practice because I want to be a cop. And the only reason I went in the Marines is to, 1, my grandfather's legacy, but 2, was to get veteran status so I could go to the top of the list and become a Boston police officer. Well, I went through all this pesky process, and they called me on a Friday night in November and told me to report to the Police Academy November 24th, 1986. And I started the police academy as a 19-year-old kid who could... when I graduated, I could seize alcohol as evidence, but I couldn't drink. That's how I get into policing.
So naturally, one of the things that we'd like to talk about is obviously the experience related to the Boston Marathon terrorist attack. You mentioned the Boston Urban Shield. Can you talk a little bit about that before we get into 2013?
Yeah. So I was a cop doing drug work in Roxbury, and the mayor tapped me on the shoulder and said, you should do this position, which was to run another police department that was, a separate police department while still reporting in the Boston Police Department. And I took it. It was a management position. I didn't want to be a boss. I want to be a cop. But the mayor had said to me, look, I'm looking at replacing my police commissioner. And, I have people who call you at 2 a.m. and you fix their problem at 2:30. That's the kind of police commissioner I'd like. So I took the job and started to go up to management and took over that role. And then things happened. I wound up being in charge of the Bureau of Field Services and the Uniform Division and all the SWAT and the bombs and that. And work-life balance challenged, I guess, is a good way to say it. And my wife made me know that. And at one point, I decided we're going to take a family vacation to New York, and the orders were that we were not going to have any conversations about work, and I wasn't going to be on the phone. So she'd always wanted to see the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and I got her a package as a present. And that Thanksgiving weekend, we drove down to New York to enjoy the parade. We had to do all the tourist stuff beforehand, but timing-wise, on the way to New York, I get a call, and my intel center tells me, hey, I want to give you a heads up. There is a plot that has been interrupted to disrupt or to attack the New York subway system. They were trying to target the holiday crowds during the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And, and of course, I reply, on story of my life, I'm going to New York, and of course, Al-Qaeda is going to be there. So we, make sure that none of our folks are taking the subway, and we're using cabs, and I don't even think Uber existed then. But we're trying to have a family event and enjoy the weekend. And then I get another call the next day, and I'm being informed about an attack in Mumbai, India. And we had a sister hotel to the hotel that was attacked in Mumbai. It was owned by the same Israeli firm. So we're starting to think of, what do we do? What should we be preparing if there's an asymmetrical attack where they're attacking the entire city of Mumbai? We know they've always wanted to do that. They've talked about doing that. But we've also heard threats of, wouldn't they like to do multiple cities around the world if they could simultaneously? So they had the news cycle as the terrorism spread across the globe. So that meant I had to stand up some resources at my location. And I remember saying to the commander of my intel division, Paul, I don't like this. Do me a favor. I want you to deploy some tactical assets to critical infrastructure locations ASAP. Now that sounds like I know what the hell I was talking about. And he said, okay, boss, I got that. And I'll never forget when he said, like where? And I, of course, went, places of criticality where there's tactical. We didn't have a plan. We had no plan for how we would stand up resources in the event of a threat that, as like Mumbai had come. We'd done active shooter training, but we weren't ready for an active shooter terrorist event. We weren't prepared. And I started to analyze that and think about it. And, we stood up resources. I wrote a plan on a hotel pad in a New York hotel room, and we didn't get hit. But we got caught flat-footed, and I was damned if I was going to be caught flat-footed again. So I started looking around at what folks were doing, what the threats were, and what we could do to change ourselves. And I found Alameda County Sheriff's Office was doing this urban shield. I liked it. It was great. It was SWAT team practice and, dealing with all kinds of challenges. So I brought the guy who created it, Jim Baker, to Boston, and I said, can you do this for me? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And what Urban Shield is not only are we training the skill sets of SWAT guys and canine handlers and firemen and medics, although Alameda didn't do firemen and medics, they did law enforcement. I did it differently in Boston. We did 24 hours. So 8 hours of SWAT guys doing SWAT, fire guys doing fire stuff, EMS and Homeland Security, everyone doing their role, doctors and nurses doing their role. We were training in silos. Police was training, fire was training, EMS was training, docs, nurses, Homeland Security was training, federal, state, local, we're all training, but we weren't training together. And when the bomb goes off, literally everyone's going to be showing up in that street. And if you haven't trained together, worked together, planned together, and figured it out beforehand, you're going to have a bigger problem than the problem that just presented itself to you. So Urban Shield, we simulated a full-scale terrorist attack. We hired Hollywood role players. They were former military personnel, some with missing arms and legs, that we millaged up. And when our teams rolled into the training cycle, so they did SWAT stuff for 8 hours with real-life role players, real-life consequences if you make mistakes. And then at the 8th hour, I call wherever you are in the region. It wasn't just Boston Police. It was the 8 cities and towns around us. So it was the police, fire, EMS, and medical units and Homeland Security and emergency management personnel for 8 cities and towns, plus the federal agencies, and everyone came to the terror site.
Let's talk a little bit about the precursor to the event. What are your memories from that day? Like, was there any indication whatsoever that, about what was about to happen?
There was no indication that anything was going to happen. So in addition to the officers who were assigned there for the entire day, we probably surged 300 plus more officers, our gang unit, bike unit, gang unit, special operations teams, motorcycle unit, school police, drug unit. We put those officers to supplement, and we watched the most densely packed areas. And that was the plan. I get to the finish line around 8:30 that morning. And 9 o'clock, I'm a little upset because there are people who are in stands and viewing areas that are VIP and that we haven't conducted a sweep with our explosive ordnance detection teams yet. And people weren't quite on the same timeline I was. So, somebody got their behind chewed out, and we started doing our job. And I walk that route every year. I walk the entire route. It goes out 1 mile Goes out 1.5 miles from Boston to the Brookline line, and then it comes back in at Newton. So I start at the finish line and I walk out to Kenmore Square. I do that for a couple of reasons. One, I was a real cop once, and I like my cops, and I like to get out there and thank them. And the other reason I do it is because I feared bombs. And I had heard the intel, and, we always poo-pooed it. Hey, there's no specific threat. However, Al-Qaeda and others are threatening, high skill, high visibility, high attendance profile events. And I was going to dot my I's and cross my T's. So we're walking that route, and I'm making sure my bomb squad's doing it by the numbers. We were good. We swept it twice with EOD. We were all set. Lead runners came in. Everything was good. We had all the extra cops on the street. Nothing happened. Governor puts laurel wreaths on people's heads. They play national anthems. I'm all set. I drive to Fenway Park, basically, and park my car. And I've got 1.5 mile that I still got to walk. Probably 200 cops' hands I haven't shaken yet. And once I do that, I'm going to go to the finish line, change into my civilian clothes, meet my wife there. And we'll have a nice dinner, and we're good to go. Another marathon on the belt. That's when I heard the radio transmission of the Delta 984. And Dan Keeler is a pretty level-headed street cop. We've been through some bad days at the office together. And Keeler had attended the briefing. And I make it a point that every supervisor attends my briefings, and they know the action plan. It's not just on a piece of paper. It's known. And when I'm talking to those cops on the street, I'm quizzing them. Hey, where's our emergency access egress here? What are we doing with that? What are we doing with this? Because it makes no sense to put all the planning in if your frontline troops responsible for implementing it aren't part of the process. So they knew what the plan was. Danny implemented it. Dan Keeler ran that scene, I think 7.5 minutes before I got there. I ran when I heard him on the radio screaming for help. Got in a car, drove there, got out. Danny approached me and told me they hit us twice, boss. They blew a device, and as people were driving, running away, they blew a second device. And he showed me where the second device was, and that young officer that I had met, that's my new neighbor, is there with a pretty significant leg injury. And next to him is an 8-year-old little boy and a beautiful young woman. And they put the bag right behind that little baby, and they destroyed him. I've seen some stuff in my life. I didn't make chief at 43 because I don't deal with crisis. I deal with crisis. I've seen some bad things. I was overwhelmed. And I froze. And someone screaming about secondary devices, and that brought me back to a day in my life I never wanted to remember before, but never want to remember again, I mean. And I'm trying to figure out how I can run and go away and hide, and I can't. And I'm trying to comprehend the devastation that's around me, and I can't. And thankfully this woman appeared, and she had a pretty mangled foot, and I'm a better than average first aid person, and I grabbed the napkin off the table, and I started screaming about her foot, and I bent down, and I started putting pressure to try and stem that blood flow. And we had it, and I put her leg up, and I told her it's going to be okay. And a medic and a firefighter come over, and they put real pressure dressings on, and they started doing it the right way. I was just using expediency, but I wouldn't let go of her leg. I was going to keep it up while they bandaged it, because I knew how to do that. I didn't know how to do what the hell was in front of me. And a Massachusetts state trooper came over and grabbed me by the collar of my jacket. And he pulled my jacket and he said, "Chief, I need you in the middle of the street, Chief." Now, I don't know if you know police jurisdictions, but he's from a different department. And he just told me what he wants me to do. And I screamed at him, "Get the F off of me." And I was furious. I was pissed. I wasn't pissed at Lieutenant Mark Horgan of the Massachusetts State Police for reminding me to be the boss that I was supposed to be. I was pissed at Dan Linskey for having to be reminded. And as I swore at Mark, I said, "Mark, give me 1 effing second, give me 1 second." And I took the deepest cleansing breaths I've ever taken in my entire life. And I tensed my whole body and shook all the tension and stress out of it, and boom, it opened. My file cabinet opened. I've got a pretty good file cabinet of leadership and trainings and experiences and scenes, and I just had to get it open. And I start going through my files, and it's assess your situation, right? And I looked around, okay, throw that file away. Bad, I know what it is. It's pretty bad. then I defined it, and it was a crime scene. Well, at crime scenes, I usually have my detectives do detective stuff. So I see my detective commander on the street about 30 feet away from me, and I tell him, Kevin, get an investigative command post set up at Ring Road in Huntington. I told him where to shut down the streets, and I said, start pulling video, go. And that's it. And I remembered a course at Harvard and a military leader who talked about when it all goes sideways, there's 500 things you need to do in the middle of chaos and crisis, and you can't do them all. But you need to pick the 5 most important, what's important now. So I assessed what that was. And I remembered him saying, look, if you don't pick the right 5, it's okay. You can change it out later on. But more important than the 5 things you pick is the method in which you deliver that message to your troops. Because if you're in front of a lectern and your clothes are all rumbled and you look like a hot mess, guess what? They're going to get that message. If your uniform looks sharp and your boots are wiped clean, they're going to get that message. And if you're going to be on the radio or the net and you're going to give directions and order to people that are in harm's way, you better be the calmest, coolest, and clearest you've ever been in your entire life. And you better write your script before you ever key that mic. And that's what I did. I come up with the 5 things I thought we needed to do. I wrote the script in my head. And I keyed that mic. And I said, we're going to set up incident command at the firehouse. We're going to conduct a sweep. We're going to treat and triage the patients and get them off the street. We're going to set up incident command at the firehouse. We're going to conduct a sweep with EOD assets to make sure there are no other devices out here on the street. We will then get people out of the restaurants and bars. And I need somebody up there to get on social media and tell the world what just happened here. Those are my 5 directives. And I have an audio clip of it where, in the middle of the chaos and the screaming, I come on with those 5 directives. And I got a lot of feedback from my troops saying that they were, like me, frozen on the street, wondering what the heck to do. And when they heard me on the radio, they said, you're pretty good on the radio most days, but you were the calmest and clearest I ever heard you. I said, okay, he's got a plan. And we started putting our plan in place and picking ourselves up and dusting ourselves off and getting going. We're a Boston cop, a state trooper, and an agent follow every tip and lead. And that's how we did it. Every tip lead, there was, FBI resource, state police resource, and Boston police officer, so that we all knew what was going on. Our respective chains of command all got the information and intel, and there was no hiding things from each other. And we started putting the case together. I got a call from the hospital. In an effort to save the Richard family, we sent them to different hospitals. So the little girl was in one hospital, Jane. She had lost her leg. She was in Children's Hospital by herself. Her mom needed surgery to see if they could save her eye. She was in a hospital. And her father was in a different hospital with his oldest son, Henry. And the little boy, Martin, who was declared deceased on scene, his body was on scene and couldn't be moved until we could get a medical examiner in there. And we couldn't get a medical examiner in there until we could make sure there were no more bombs. And we couldn't make sure there were... Then we had to get a forensic team in there to do analysis, and it was going to be a long process. And I had ordered everyone out of the scene except for the bomb squad. And my congressman, Steve Lynch, was with the family, the father, and he's a friend of his. He found out his son's body was still on Boylston Street several hours later and was very upset. Signed himself out against medical advice and told the congressman he was going to see his wife, who was coming out of anesthesia. And after he saw Denise, he was going to get his son's body. I told Stephen what we were doing. He said, Danny, I know what you're doing. I know why. I'm just letting you know he's very upset and it could be a problem. So I called the captain who was responsible for that scene, and I told him we had a problem and we got to figure out how we're going to deal with that. Two things are not going to happen. One, that father is not getting that scene. And 2, no cop is going to arrest that father if he tries to get in the scene. Because I've seen it too many times at horrible scenes where family members get emotional and they push a cop and then they get arrested, and it's never good for anybody. But the captain told me he disobeyed my direct order. And I'd like to kiss him on the cheek, because what he told me is that he and 4 other men, 2 of them were former United States Marines, and they thought the appropriate protocol with dead bodies were to have an honor guard stand at attention next to them. So the 4 men and the captain rotated that through every half hour, taking turns providing an honor guard to the beautiful young woman and the little boy who were laying on the street. And Captain Armstrong told me I have my own my own kids. I'm not leaving this little boy alone. We're going to take him home. We'll be with him. We'll escort him personally to the morgue. No one's leaving this child. That's the weight that was on my soul when I walked into my house at 2 a.m. And, we started the investigation. It was a pretty wild time. This president came to town. That requires some resources. We were looking at 3 subjects that we were trying to rule in or out. It's pretty good. When the Zaniah brothers went to MIT and murdered Sean Collier. The phone rang, and it was the inside operations line at Boston Police Headquarters. I asked, what do we got? And they said, we got a cop shot at MIT, boss. I said, is it one of ours? They said, we don't know. I said, how bad? Bad. So I put my uniform on and I drove my police car 100 miles an hour heading to MIT. So we had surveillance at MIT with, federal, state, and local agents and cops. And Zaniah went to the other side of the campus, committed a murder. And then I heard about the carjacking and realized these were our guys. Hearing one of my cops is in the middle of the gun battle screaming, and there are bullets flying all around in different locations, and I don't know where the hell I'm supposed to be going or where he's at, and he's calling for an ambulance because one of the cops is down. And finally I hear where he says he is, and I realize he's 2 blocks down the street from me, so we turn around the corner and we run down, and Dick Downey, he was shot. A bunch of cops were doing first aid on him. I knew I couldn't help him at all, and I looked over to my left. Hamlin Zaniah was shot by Jeff Puglisi, the Watertown police officer. He was then run over by his brother and dragged down the street a bit. But even in that condition, he was still fighting. He was a former professional boxer. He's a pretty cut kid. He's a tough kid. And he was refusing to be handcuffed as Puglisi and Jarrett Giroux from my gang unit were trying to cuff him, and I had a plan for that. He deployed 5 bombs against us, 3 of which exploded, 2 that did not. 2 of them were within 5 feet of the cops who were struggling with him, and I was afraid he had a remote detonator on his body and a suicide vest because he used remote detonators on Boylston Street. So I ran up and I put my Glock 40 to his temple. And I told him to strip him, and all I needed to do was see it. If I saw the vest, if I saw a garage door opener, if I saw a cell phone in his lunging distance, anywhere he could get it, I was going to kill him. That was my plan. And we cuffed him and stripped him, and he had nothing he could hurt us with. I holstered my weapon, and I called for an ambulance, and we did first aid on him. As I loaded him in the ambulance, I leaned down and I looked him right in the eyes, and I told him he was going to burn in hell for what he did to that little boy. I believe I'm the last law enforcement official to speak with him alive. He died when he got to the hospital shortly thereafter. We rolled his thumbprint, found out who he was, then we found out who his brother was, and the hunt continued. And we hunted and hunted and hunted, and somewhere, someplace, some location, a number come up, and it took us to New Bedford, Massachusetts, and we had to make a decision how to get resources there pretty quickly. So we get notified that we were interested in a phone in New Bedford that had turned on, and we're trying to get resources there and trying to figure out how to do it quick. I put one SWAT team from the state police on a helicopter. HRT was flying up from Quantico, so our FBI team was going to meet us there. And I had to pick one Boston police team, so I picked my nephew Jamie's team, because if anyone's going to kick that door in New Bedford and find him, I wanted it to be Jamie. And Jamie took the lead down there, and that's when I got a tap on the shoulder from my boss when I landed helicopters in a parking lot in an urban city. And he realized that I was having a hard time holding my head up, and that I was having a hard time, like I wasn't able to stand and comprehend well. I hadn't had more than the 39 minutes of sleep the night before since Monday. And he said, I think, Danny, you're exhausted. I think I have to ask you to leave. And I never stepped down from an assignment in my life, but I knew he was right. And I said, I got it, boss. Yep, you're right. I got somebody else in to take over for me, another superintendent. And I came out of that command post to go home and get relieved. And I was okay with it because I had just sent my nephew Jamie and his SWAT guys down to where we thought the terrorist was hiding. So I could run that from my cell phone. I didn't need to be in a command post for that. I was waiting to hear what Jamie had to say, and I was just waiting for this to be over. I don't know, 15 minutes later, my superintendent of field services called, and he's screaming, Chief, I don't know if it's him. It could be a homeless guy. We thought he had him in a boat, and the cops showed up, and everyone started shooting. We were afraid he had explosives and an AR-15 and an M4, so they backed up. and they made a call for one SWAT team. But unfortunately, all the cops came back as quick as they could, surrounded the boat. He put a boat hook through the plastic, we think to poke a hole, but it looked like a rifle. Someone fired a round. We don't know who it is because 310 rounds, I think, were fired. And I started watching on CNN, and then everything went dark. I woke up on my couch. It was 4 a.m. My TV was off. Last I know, he was in a boat. We were negotiating with him, and I started screaming, Michelle, Michelle, Michelle. My wife come down. I'm like, how could you let me go to sleep? How could? She's like, you didn't go to sleep. You're unconscious. You passed out. You hadn't slept in 4 days, you idiot. We got him. You got him. Is he alive? He's alive. Cops okay? Yeah, cops are okay. So I slept through the biggest culmination of the biggest case of my entire life. And I went upstairs, took a shower, put my uniform on, and walked out, and I became the chief again, and had to deal with cops who saw stuff they should never have seen, and trying to figure out how to keep them healthy and not harming themselves, and how do we move forward from this, and how do we prevent the next one from occurring. And so that's the marathon story.
So thank you to you, to your colleagues and your family. I heard you mention your wife, Michelle, many times, and I imagine she's right there with you all through it all, and also your nephew, Jamie. So thank you. This was an extraordinary event in human history, obviously law enforcement and Homeland Security focused, but in your mind, are there any lessons that you would offer to corporate leaders based on all of your experiences?
Yes, so whatever your crisis is, slow down, take those deep cleansing breaths, get out of the freeze mode and get into your fight mode. You prepared yourself for your position in your company. You earned it. You earned your position. You're doing it because you have a knowledge. You've got a file cabinet of leadership, and you need to open it. So the first thing you got to do is open that cabinet up as quickly as possible. So do the same thing I did. Take those deep cleansing breaths. Assess your situation. I don't care what your crisis is, whether it's a terrorist attack, whether it's a cyber attack that is going to cause you to, impact your relationship as a CEO. What are the 5 most important things you got to do right away? No matter what the crisis is, you can come up with 5 things you need to do right away. And that gives you a measurable opportunity to identify it, come up with a plan, and respond, and not be caught flat-footed. So you want to get out of the gate as quickly as possible. So I think my 5 things in crisis is crucial for all. I think being calm, cool, and collected when you present that to your team is crucial to all. Teams are looking for leaders. And if you've done your job as a leader, you should be leaving a wake of leadership behind you. I didn't have to tell my detective commander how to do his job because I surrounded myself with somebody who was good at their job, better at doing investigations than I was. If you look around you and you've surrounded yourself with people that have less skill sets than you do, you're doing it wrong. You should be the conductor in the orchestra with the most talented people you can put into a room together, who far outweigh your talents in many ways, shapes, and form. And your talent is picking them and putting them together and giving them the ability to work together and work on challenges and problems together. So I think that transcends law enforcement, Homeland Security, corporate world. We all have our challenges and our concerns and issues and crises, and they vary. But I think if you take them the way I kind of took them, I think it's a good way to start, and we'll get you through.
Well, I think we will leave it there. This has been an extremely insightful conversation. We thank you for your years of service in your distinguished career, and we thank you for stopping by and sharing your views.
What a great conversation with a truly incredible leader. I was so impressed to hear how Danny used knowledge and data to drive effective simulations during training. So often, we train individual aspects of a response, as if a crisis is going to be compartmentalized. But Danny spent time reviewing prior incidents. He knew that when the bomb goes off, everyone converges in one place. As such, he appropriately developed training programs that incorporated multiple agencies and first responder groups. This use of real-life facts to drive training ensured Boston PD's response on April 15, 2013 was more cohesive and therefore more effective. And I think we can all learn a lot from that.
I completely agree, Shireen. There are so many lessons that are packed into Danny Linskey's story of what happened on April 15th and in the days afterward, but you and I honed in on the same one. From my perspective, one thing that Danny said that was so profoundly important was Urban Shield training absolutely saved lives on Boylston Street. Yes, every first responder department has a plan for how to respond in a crisis, and they each practice those plans. But what made the difference that day is they practiced their plans together in a coordinated fashion. That's the difference, which, in Danny's words, absolutely saved lives that day. So the question for business leaders is this: are all the parts of your organization prepared to work together in a coordinated fashion in a time of crisis? Yes, it begins with first having a plan in the first place, but have you ever tested that plan? Do you have complete confidence that everyone responsible in your organization for responding to a crisis knows exactly what they need to do? Have they practiced it? Do they have all the tools and resources they need at their disposal 24/7, 365? The only way to be sure is to run your team through a realistic simulation to help them build that muscle memory so that they're prepared to respond should a crisis ever actually occur. Another lesson business leaders should take away from Danny's experience is the value of being your own media outlet. He talked about bpdnews.com as an unfiltered means for the department to communicate with the public. As a business leader in a crisis, ask yourself, how will you push out information and updates to your key stakeholders, including and especially your employees? If you do nothing else, identify the channels that you'll use to communicate in a crisis and also who will operate them. At a bare minimum, create a specific page on your site that you can publish in a crisis, which we call a dark page. This is a single page you'll use to post updates, information, and instructions for your external audiences. For employees, determine how you're going to connect with them in a way that you can be sure they're going to get the information they need. Now, email is one channel, but will your employees see that email in time? Ideally, you'll have the technology in place to send out a single message that gets sent simultaneously to your employees via email, telephone, and SMS text. Now, if you have that technology, great. Now answer this question. Who in your organization can access it? Do you have their phone number? What if that person is on vacation or unreachable? These are all very basic questions, and there's a good chance that most companies have all of these measures in place. But the main point is to ensure that in a crisis, you have specific channels that you own and control, and that you can use to get vital information out to people who need it as quickly as possible.
You've been listening to Inside the War Room, Case Studies in Crisis. Inside the War Room is produced by global communications firm BCW and global investigations firm Kroll, a division of Duff & Phelps. For more information about this episode, and to learn more about how you can work with BCW and Kroll to prepare, respond, and recover from a crisis affecting your organization, visit our website at itwrpodcast.com.